Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is our alumni career chat focusing on aerospace. If you've joined us for alumni career chats before, you know this is a series of events that the Career Center puts on. We focus on a different industry each time. Sometimes it's a STEM focus, sometimes it's humanities, pre-med, law. Today's one, as I say, will be on aerospace, and we got a great panel lined up. The way it'll work today is just for our short time together, I have a few questions I'm going to throw at the panelists. Most of them are questions that they can all answer, and at least one is an individual question. And then I'm going to turn the time over to the students. This is very much an opportunity for you to ask questions. I want to make sure that you walk away learning. Having your questions answered is really, really important. I encourage you to put those questions into the chat as we go. Don't wait, just put them in the chat, we'll build them up. Or even better, if you feel courageous, come off mute or come on the camera and ask the question yourself. As an introduction, my name is Mike. I'm with the Career Center. I'm a career counselor and I support engineering and physical sciences students. So many of the students that I see are interested in going into aerospace. As you know, up until now, Cal has not had an aerospace major, but that will change in the fall. They've just introduced an aerospace major, and they'll have their first cohort of about 40 students, and I think they're really excited about that. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists, and I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves and then also to answer the question. Share your name, your role, and also what does your day-to-day involve? I guess the question is, what is your engagement or involvement with the aerospace industry? So I'll just go in order on my screen. Maybe we'll start with you, Alex, and then Magali and Mariana.
All right, good afternoon. So I am the Vice President of Operations for a company called Lucix. We're a subsidiary of HEICO, which is a company that does a lot of aftermarket solutions for commercial aviation and then also electronic systems. So specifically my company, we make communication devices that are primarily spacebound. And so I have everything from once the design is released, everything from procuring all the parts, assembling it, testing it, and getting it out the door. That team falls under me. And so my day-to-day is a little bit of everything. Sometimes it's working within the executive leadership team of coordinating to make sure with program management and with engineering. And with program management, a lot of our customers are all the major primes that you see in aerospace. So we're working closely with the Boeings, the Airbuses, that type of industry. But it's a fun job because there's that portion of it with customers and the leadership team, but I can also get out on the floor with the team as they're actually putting the hardware together, checking on as they're testing all of it. So it's a little bit different every day. That's the overview.
And so we'll go ahead next. Hi, everyone. I'm Magali Barba-Sevilla. I'm a product engineer and radar specialist at Esri. They're a mapping software company. You might more commonly know them as the creators of ArcMap and ArcGIS and ArcGIS Pro. So at Esri, I lead the design of synthetic aperture radar data tools. So my day-to-day role involves working closely with software developers to implement SAR algorithms as tools. I work on testing these tools. I work on creating Python scripts to automate this testing so we can test daily. I work on writing documentation to explain what synthetic aperture radar data is to users and how you can work with it and how you can use our tools to exploit this data. I also interface with satellite companies to better understand how to support their data, to get the information for developers in order to support this data. I also work with product management to know which companies' data is to prioritize, what are the new hot applications. So a little bit of everything.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mariana Verdugo. I'm currently a manufacturing engineer at Collins Aerospace. We recently merged with Raytheon Technologies about 1.5 years ago. So I support the production of sensors that go into commercial and defense aircrafts. My day-to-day, I like to break it up into 3 categories. There's like the real-time problem resolution. So with production, a lot of things get on fire. So like people have questions that I need to clarify for them. Equipment goes down, something just isn't working that usually does work. So just getting on the floor and helping out the team. In addition, I work on long-term yield projects that help the company in terms of cost reductions. You want to save the company, so throwing away the least amount of materials, and those can take a couple of months to 6 months to a year, from determining root cause, corrective action, implementing corrective action. And most recently, I've been supporting like new product introduction. So working closely with design engineers and supporting them with validating some of their specs and making sure documentation is as good as possible. I'm the one who understands the issues that happen in production. So giving them that insight. And something that's inevitable with engineering is just constant collaboration with so many other engineers, along with like finance people, operations. My job, it's maximizing quality, but keeping the customer deadlines in mind, and operations will always remind me of that.
All right, thank you. Something I learned from that introduction is how varied the aerospace industry can be, right? It's when we think of like software engineering or data science, it's just there's so many different ways that you can be in aerospace and do something that looks very different to somebody else. So thanks for that introduction. Mariana, I'm going to stay with you for the next question and kind of want to get a sense from the panelists, how did you get to this point? Like, how did you navigate your career and maybe also your academic career to get to this point?
Sure. So as was mentioned, I graduated in engineering physics. I was always interested in the aerospace industry, and as mentioned, Berkeley generally or historically has not had an aerospace degree. So I pursued engineering physics. I pushed it heavy on the engineering and mechanical engineering side of it. I took all the physics requirements, which I just really loved. I loved quantum mechanics. And I just focused heavily on any extracurriculars that could improve my aerospace like resume, making me look good for companies such as being on like Aero SAE. I was in Berkeley Emergent Space Integrities Lab, so BEST lab. I took like as many aero classes as I could. But navigating into my professional career, for personal reasons, I needed to move to Minnesota. So I was applying to aerospace companies in Minnesota, which was a bit challenging because I'm from Southern California, went to Berkeley, so my network wasn't bigger than California. So I just applied to jobs, and I was very fortunate that a smaller company called Ballistic Recovery Systems Aerospace, BRS Aerospace, interviewed me and they accepted me. So I moved here to Minnesota working for them. They're like a 50-person company, so a very small company. So I got that experience, which I'm really grateful about. But then during COVID, so they support like small aircrafts like Cessnas, for example, like Cirrus. So they would make parts for those sorts of companies. And during COVID, they were a smaller company, so they needed to like relocate. So then I started applying to jobs again. And I was fortunate enough to get a job at Collins Aerospace, which is the complete opposite of a 50-person company. There's hundreds of thousands of employees, and it's a worldwide company. Especially now that we're working with Raytheon Technologies. So it's massive. So yeah, I just focused my engineering physics degree heavy on the aerospace as much as I could, and then applied to a smaller aerospace company and then moved on to Collins Aerospace.
Mariana, would you say you've had your eye on aerospace from the beginning?
Yeah. Since high school.
But then was it coming to Cal where they didn't have that as a major? Did you see that it was going to be a challenge then?
Yeah, so every school I got admitted to, I got into their aerospace mechanical programs, but then Berkeley was just, I wanted to go to Berkeley. So I compromise, but I'm grateful for it.
When you saw the news about the aerospace major, you were like, oh, great, now it comes along.
Yeah. Is it going to be ABET accredited?
I would imagine so. Yeah, I would hope so. If they want to be relevant, yes. All right, thank you. Magali, how about you?
Sure. So I probably have the least traditional background of the speakers here. I graduated with a geophysics bachelor's back in 2012. So as an undergrad, I was involved in earthquake science research. But the way that I was doing that earthquake science research was using traditional approaches like using data collected from seismometers. But it wasn't until I started my master's and I was doing my research at JPL where I started learning about earthquakes, researching earthquakes from space. So using synthetic aperture radar data. I continued to use that methodology into my PhD, which I'm currently finishing at CU Boulder, also in geophysics. So while I've been finishing my PhD, I've also been able to continue working at JPL. So I've interned through 3 programs, the NASA Developed Program, a JPL Graduate Fellowship Program, and also the JPL Visiting Student Researcher Program. And it was through those internships, through those internships and my research experience that I was really able to go into the intersection of geophysics and image processing and aerospace, which is SAR.
Yeah, thanks for that. How about you, Alex?
So similar to Mariana, I have always been interested in aerospace. I was raised in a family with a lot of exposure to space technology. And then I personally was more drawn to the aviation side. So when I got into Cal, it was in the undeclared engineering program. And I thought I would want to go more the EECS route. Got into it and my heart just wasn't in it. And I took some IEOR classes and, say what you will about IEOR, it was the complete right fit for me. And it was very translatable into a manufacturing environment. And so I had done internships, like I actually started in high school. Northrop Grumman had a high school internship program. And then the summers in between Cal, I was interning for L3 Communications at the time. They're now Harris. And so when I was coming out of school, it was a matter of, okay, where do I want to go? I know I want to be in aerospace. And I ended up and moving to Palmdale to work for Northrop Grumman out in the desert by myself. And I started as an industrial engineer on the floor doing production scheduling, and then moved up from there. But it was pretty translatable for the IUR degree into the role. They were not as concerned because it was not an actual like design aerospace type of position. But I would say that as you guys are moving forward and there's going to be an aerospace role, it's really exciting, I think, in order to build that Cal alumni relationship that then will be able to pull in other disciplines of engineering that are interested in the aerospace field as well.
So if we think of the aerospace industry, and like you've already established, it's pretty broad. So, but on your perspective, where do you see the most growth? I think we hear a lot about space programs, which I'm sure are getting a lot of attention. But from your perspective, are there other areas that students could possibly explore that are growing in the industry? Magali, start with you.
Sure, this is particularly true in the field of SAR. So SAR startups like Capella and ISI have revolutionized this field. So traditionally, civil SAR satellites, like the European Space Agency's Sentinel-1 constellation, which consists of 2 satellites, Sentinel-1A and 1B, they acquire images about every 6 days. So that's what we're traditionally used to. But with these SAR startups, they're able to achieve, by using microsatellites, they're able to achieve a revisit time about, gosh, every hour or so. So for example, Capella is about, they're planning to launch a total of 36 satellites. And with this constellation, they'll be able to achieve a revisit time of about less than an hour, which is like just insane. It's something I'm not used to. So we're gonna have so much data and so many new avenues of analysis with this wealth of data.
And when you say images of what?
Sorry, yeah, I should have explained that. So star images are 2D radar images of the Earth. So they will provide you, and the backscatter providing these images will give you information on the dielectric properties of the Earth's surface. So they can help you distinguish between a sad crop or a missile, for example. And so ideally, we would have this data available at all hours of the day, but it's not possible. So the higher the repeat visit time, the better.
And what technical skills would fit well into that field?
So I've had to become pretty comfortable with programming. So SAR data, unlike optical data, which is what most of our users are more familiar with, takes a lot more processing. So for example, I need to use satellite's orbit to better actually locate the pixels of that image, which is not the same case for optical data. Yeah, you have to use sensor-specific information, like what's the sensor's pulse repetition frequency to determine what the ultimate resolution of this image will eventually be. So being comfortable with programming, picking up new information, being comfortable with math, all those skills are very relevant and useful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Alex, what about you? Where do you see growth in the industry?
Everywhere. In terms of like the aviation side, I think given what's going on in the world, it would be remiss not to acknowledge that there's probably going to be increased defense spending. And so a lot of your established companies, you're going to see just growth in terms of probably they're hiring in order to ramp up production or get technology faster out the door. And then on the space side, obviously things are getting stirred up with Artemis and everything, the goals that they're laying out in terms of getting us back to the moon and then to Mars. That trickles down into so many different opportunities. I mean, just the amount of startups that are popping up, depending on if you're interested in the launch side, in the hardware side, on space as a service. I mean, there is no shortage of opportunity depending on, I think, what students are interested in. I think that if you take your niche of like what you're really, really interested in terms of, even if it's supply chain, I mean, there is a place for you in aerospace right now. And I specifically struggle to hire RF engineers, manufacturing engineers, and then engineers who are interested in like the materials and parts side of it. And that was true both in the environment I was at with Northrop Grumman on the aviation side and where I'm at now on the space side. Those are three very difficult roles. So specifically, if people are in EECS and they're open-minded to RF, I know it's not, you know, maybe not the sexiest right now, but if that is something that they're open to and interested in learning about, they will have their pick of the litter with job opportunity.
Yeah, that is the information we had come for. That's great. Okay.
Yes.
And
also, yes, this is a 757 cockpit. I saw your question.
Yeah.
My husband is a pilot for FedEx and is learning how to fly the 757.
Okay, that's good. And you mentioned space as a service, and I hadn't really thought of that. Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, space as a service. But
that really ties into what Magali is doing in terms of imaging and people being able to buy that as a service instead of just as the hardware that goes up and one company owns the mission and all the data with it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so something I wanted to mention to add to that is what's unique about Capella is that you can request an image to be acquired. Like that was not, that hasn't been an option to civilians in the past. So it's a really powerful service.
It's a whole new frontier, isn't it? Yeah. Mariana, how about you?
Yeah, echoing on what was already said, but also like our world has just become so intertwined with so much international travel. I feel like COVID kind of slowed that down a bit. I know at my company, we were producing the most we've ever had, have made the most profit in like 2019, and then COVID hit, but things are slowly starting to ramp up again. And as mentioned, we have a lot of like private projects in the space area. So a lot of those our deadlines are coming up. So it just shows how much innovation is occurring in the space industry.
Yep. I want to ask a little, Mariana, you mentioned this previously about groups and clubs like Cal SAE that you joined, and I wanted to ask you about what other recommendations do the three of you have for what can students do now other than coursework? And I think there's at least one club. Anything else that they can do to build hard or soft skills that are transferable? I'll just open it up to anyone.
I will chime in with leadership. Any type of, it does not matter if it's Greek life or demonstrating mentoring or starting projects or volunteering something, because at least in my experience, there has been such a shortage of people who are talented in the technical realm, interested in aerospace, and really want to take a leadership position. And as a lot of the like brain trust of aerospace is aging out, getting people in who want to learn this stuff, learn it fast, get their hands dirty, and have demonstrated before that they're able to humble themselves and be a leader. I think that is one of the, like when I'm looking at a candidate, demonstration of that type of experience is really, really important.
Definitely. And as I've mentioned, like even as engineers or computer scientists, like there's so much interactions with peers and so much work with team members. So developing the ability to like work with a teammate and make compromise and resolve issues in a civil way. Like professionalism is so important, and it's something that, especially as like, I don't know what we are, like iGen, we're younger than millennials, but like we're not used to kind of being told what to do, and just finding that balance. And just echoing on all the building teams we have on campus. Also, aerospace is an application of just engineering, such as like mechanical engineering. So I was on the Cal Sol team for a couple of years. So, and there's also like an aerodynamics team within Cal Sol. So just being on a building team where you're working with others, figuring out how to solve problems, having deadlines, timelines, all of that will be reflected in your interviews and also in your actual performance at work.
I would advise students to get involved in either research or as many internships as possible as an undergrad. Like well, not only does it build your skills, but it also gives you a better idea of what fields you actually want to pursue. If I wouldn't have done the internships that I did, I would have never gone to the intersection of geophysics and aerospace. So for me, it was essential to participate in that kind of research.
Yeah. And how about coursework? I think somebody mentioned math. Are there specific courses either in engineering or EECS or math or others that students could squeeze in now before they graduate?
So I found the course that was most useful to me was like an introduction to MATLAB programming. This was specifically offered through Earth and Planetary Sciences, but any kind of introduction to Python programming or MATLAB programming. I think that would be like the most transferable skill you could have.
Yeah, there's Alex or Mariana.
Yeah, I took MATLAB. I think it was what was it? Engineering 7 something. So I don't know. Actually, I totally forgot. I think, as mentioned, like aerospace is so broad. So like in my area, just having a solid foundation in like thermodynamics helps a ton, because I'm working on sensors that go into engines, understanding like heat transfer. But also like if you're on like the design team, understanding a little bit more on like the aerodynamic side of it. So I know ME 163 was a course I took, which is more aero specific. I think just doing whatever you like, the classes you enjoy, and having fun and being good at them, I think would just help you, because it'll be reflected in the work you do, and a lot of things you learn on the job. So I think it just, like, the point of college isn't always to become an expert. At least as an undergrad with a bachelor's, it's to be good at learning and being excited to gain knowledge and being flexible to learn from others. And that's what it is at work. It's just really fast paced.
I would say that if you were planning on going into any of the engineering disciplines that will have some type of manufacturing counterpart, even if you won't be directly working on the line, but if you're on the design side of something that will be built, I don't know if she's still there, but Professor Yano taught a class on production system analysis, extremely practical, and just knowing the language. So if you're going to design something that's going to then be built, I think that would give you a tool set in order to be able to really work with the people who are going to be putting together your product. And I loved that class personally.
Alex, going to stay with you for the next question. Just want to know more about working for a defense contractor. Like what opportunities, but also what challenges come with that?
Mm-hmm. So the technology is super cool. I mean, I straight out of school was working on all kinds of classified stuff. There's ups and downs to that. To me, it was like a dream come true, working on a lot of that like black box type stuff and on the final assembly line of all of that. Some of the difficult part of that is my husband still doesn't know what I was working on all of those years in like our early marriage. And just logistically, I was in a classified box all day, every day. I had no cell phone access. So it cuts down your opportunities in terms of remote work or flexibility. And my friends were working and living in San Francisco, or moving into LA or New York and stuff. And that type of opportunity just wasn't in those big city centers. But for me personally, it was 110% worth the sacrifice. And I think also too, that there's a ton of opportunity if you're willing to move to those locations. So if you're someone who is willing to work hard, willing to get to know the product, and want to put yourself in that type of position to learn a lot really, really fast. And, if you're able to get the opportunity to lead, I think that there's a lot less probably competition than in other places. And so to me, that meant being able to take on responsibility, probably even before I was fully ready, but it's given me then additional opportunities because of that, working in the defense sphere.
And you mentioned that kind of the classified status, and a lot of students, international students, don't have opportunities to work in aerospace because for many roles you need to be a US citizen. Is that true for, like, what percentage of aerospace does that apply? Like if there are international students who want to work in aerospace, are there areas of that can support students who are not citizens?
Yeah, there are, especially now with what's happening like within the launch industry and like the commercial and civil side with the satellites, or as like Mariana mentioned in terms of general aviation with Cessna and all of that stuff. Basically, the further you get from the defense and the further you get from the prime contractors, the more opportunity there is if you're not a US citizen. And so, Mine actually is just a US person's in order to work at my site. So as long as you have like documentation, then you're able to work there. You don't have to be an actual citizen, versus when I was in the desert working on the classified stuff, it was very much so. We had like a couple people even had dual citizenships and had to relinquish the other country status in order to be able to get their clearances in order to go forward from there.
Yeah, I saw that a student pointed that out to me on an application for a role at NASA, that they had to give up dual citizenship. Magali, Mariana, same question for you. Are there kind of areas within your work that are like friendlier to non-US citizens?
Yeah, so at my company, since we do work internationally, we do have like team members in like India that we work closely with. However, as mentioned, there are a lot of things we can't share. So I think it's feeling comfortable with contributing. It depends what like company you're working for. If it's a company that does have a lot of defense contracts involved, such as Collins and Raytheon, you're gonna be able to contribute and there are jobs available. However, there will be limitations, and being okay with that if you're passionate in the field. However, there are a handful of companies out there that are just specific to civil and just commercial, such as like a Cirrus and stuff like that. So just something to consider.
So unlike other NASA centers, JPL is special because they are managed by Caltech. So I know that there are many opportunities for international students at JPL that there wouldn't be at other NASA centers. With that being said, I think that in regards to like undergraduate internships at at JPL, I don't think there's any available to international students, but there is a program called Cert, where you could participate in aerospace related research at Caltech, where you might be collaborating with somebody at NASA at JPL, but you wouldn't be able to physically be at JPL. I would say there's more opportunities at JPL once you're at the master's and PhD level. If you're undocumented, I would suggest trying to do as many research internships at a university.
Mariana, I wanted to ask you about mentorship. Your LinkedIn profile, you kind of cite mentorship as really important, and was wondering if you could speak about how that has helped you and what advice you have for students to seek out a mentor.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very passionate about mentorship. I'm currently like a mentor and a mentee because I'm just in that little sweet spot right now where I'm a young professional. As a mentee, it's just, especially I'm a like first generation woman of color in the aerospace industry, which is very rare. Like there isn't anyone in my company that looks like me right now, especially I'm in Minnesota. So just like seeking relationships with like high level women engineers and just getting their advice. And it helps with like just like building confidence, support navigating the industry. Also just someone that you can kind of trust and kind of let them know how you're feeling. Maybe you wouldn't share that to like your boss or like a male peer. But then I have this like female mentor who I like really look up to, but I also have like an Asian American male high level engineer, because I also value different perspectives, and maybe he thinks about something the way I wouldn't think about it. He can give me some technical advice, which I really appreciate. But also because I didn't have a lot of mentorship, I've been volunteering a lot at the local state school here. We have University of Minnesota here. So I'm a mentor for their engineering school, and I'm also a mentor for their SHIP program, which is the Hispanic group there. So I'm really grateful that I can kind of like serve as an example and give them share about my experiences as a young professional transitioning into the industry, ways to get involved into mentorship. There's like the formal and informal. Formal being like literally applying to mentorship programs and reaching out to programs like this to see like, hey, does UC Berkeley offer anything? So that would be more formal. And then there's the informal where maybe through networking or family or any way, you can just start to naturally develop that mentorship relationship where you're just asking them for advice. And I know at the industry level, like my company has so many mentorship opportunities. There's like 3 mentorship programs going on simultaneously along with like a networking program. And I put networking and mentorship, like they overlap a ton, because through networking, when I click with someone, I just send them a follow-up, and if they click with me, they send follow-ups for me, and we just develop that relationship very naturally. So I just think networking and mentorship are so important, especially as young professionals or college students transitioning into the industry.
That's great information. I'm going to jump to the chat. There are a couple of questions in there. One of them seems really particular to sustainable fuel. So I'll read the question. I don't think the student is on the call anymore, but I'll read the question out. And then if you feel like you could answer, give it a shot. We read a lot about sustainable fuels these days, electric, eVTOL in particular, hydrogen. Are these too novel to overthrow the status quo of civil aviation, or did you just omit them? I'll admit I'm not 100% sure what the question is, but if somebody on the panel or even a student can explain, that'd be great.
My guess is he asked the question while we were talking about like where there's areas of growth.
Yeah.
I can't speak intelligently to any of the companies that are actually pursuing this technology, but I am definitely aware that there's startups and then kind of startup type projects within some of the more established older companies that are pursuing that type of stuff. I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and I think, I think startup is the key word there. I think, Magali, you mentioned startups too. I think that's where a lot of the niche technology, I think that is a good place. And if you're looking where to find those roles, Angels List is a job board for startups. So it's a good place to look. I
would say though, or I would add to that, Mike, that I wouldn't assume that some of the established companies aren't doing that type of stuff. I will speak for, I'm privy to, I know like Northrop and Lockheed, and they all have divisions that are throwing a ton of money, resources, and manpower at stuff like this because they also want to remain competitive within the marketplace. So I would say that it might be harder to specifically find what roles those are when you're applying through like the big job sites of like, hey, how do I know if I'm getting into the actual department that is doing that new type of technology? But it definitely exists. So maybe if you get your foot in the door, you can kind of get a better sense. A lot of them are called like man-tech or, that type of position.
And then a question from Andrew. I'm a current junior transfer as a chemical engineering major with plans to pursue an aerospace engineering minor. As I've talked to some of my mentors and peers, I kind of get the feeling that I may not be in the right program to get into the aerospace field. Is there any advice for someone like me who might have to transition into the field with a major that doesn't traditionally go into aerospace? Good question, Andrew.
I'll say that we have a few chemical engineers at my company. So it's not like there aren't any chemical engineers. Every engineer brings a different perspective. I would, hopefully you all still have career fairs or at least virtual ones. Start kind of speaking to recruiters and seeing like if there's interest in a chemical engineer and like what you can do for them. I think it's just very unique to the positions they're looking for, but I wouldn't give up on it. I would just maybe focus on just more of like the mechanical side of your courses. Like if there's any overlap, like in the mechanical engineering, or if you with your aerospace minor, that should be pretty good. Yeah, and ideally like an internship, if you can get something like mechanical engineering or aerospace engineering heavy, maybe between your junior and senior year, or if you do a 5th year between your senior and your last year, something like that could add a lot of value.
I'll say my two highest paid consultants, my like two best process engineers I have are both chemical engineers. One of them has a PhD in it. And that's on the aerospace side in terms of like all of the chip processing, on the RF technology side in terms of understanding how all of the chip and die attach comes together in terms of RF electronics. And then back on the the aviation aerospace side, the materials that they're coming up with, all the composite bonded structures, all of that stuff is super heavy in chemical engineering. So I would say, oh, there's a ton of opportunity for you. It's just a matter of like what you're interested in.
Magali, you mentioned the benefit of research, right? So I think with doing chemical engineering, which is quite a heavily research-based major, I think there's some pretty transferable skills from that you can bring into aerospace, right?
Absolutely. So yeah, getting involved in as much research or participating in an internship next summer, I think that would be the best way to pave your path.
Yeah. And Andrew, for my career counselor hat on, I agree. I think, if you look at any aerospace company and on LinkedIn and look at the people and their backgrounds, I think you'll be surprised to see the majors that pop up. I mean, it's very common for people to transition from different majors, and chemical engineering is not that far removed from aerospace. So I don't think you need to change your program. It's just a matter of supplementing with other courses and skills that you can then transition into aerospace. Yeah. And Andrew, I saw you asked a question about the mentoring too. Mariana, I know you spoke on this a little earlier. Is there anything extra you can add? Andrew was asking, where would you recommend to look through to find a mentor in the field, and any tips on reaching out?
I think like attending programs like this is a good start, because I think like myself, I'm very open to just staying connected to people. So like feel free to reach out to me on my LinkedIn. Just look up my full name, Mariana Verdugo. I use LinkedIn pretty heavily. I think UC Berkeley has a great network. So you can filter your LinkedIn through like chemical engineering, UC Berkeley, aerospace industry, and you just get everyone who's in that industry. And you can just connect by like kind of like an informational interview, just by showing interest of like, hey, I'm an undergrad in this field. Your job sounds awesome. Can I hear a little bit about it? And you might get rejected and you might not, but that's just a good way to start networking and just getting more comfortable with communicating to people in the industry. And you never know, maybe something can work out. I know it's worked out for me in the past. Also, like, I'm not fully aware of UC Berkeley programs, but maybe you can chat with Mike a little bit about that to see if there's any opportunities. But yeah, I think that's a start for me.
We have Berkeley Connect, which is a mentoring program which pairs students with alums in specific fields. So I think that's definitely a good place to start. Magali, wanted to ask about your role. It's a software company. How have you brought in the aerospace elements into that?
So, as I said, just trying to work with this data and make it analysis ready, make it interpretable is where that aerospace part comes in. So as I mentioned earlier, optical data, it's passive data, knowing where the signal is, like where that signal is associated with a certain pixel on the ground is pretty straightforward. But because radar data is, well, specifically synthetic aperture radar is active sensing, you need to do a bit more image processing to actually get this data analysis ready. So in the past, getting this SAR data ready has been limited to experts in the field. But at Esri, in my current role, I'm trying to develop tools to make this processing accessible to your average user, a user that wouldn't have any kind of aerospace knowledge or knowledge of image processing, and allow them to analyze this data and apply it to an application they're interested in.
I want to talk about challenges you've experienced in the industry. Alex, you referenced, the classification, not being able to share information. interested for the three of you with your industries, locations, and companies. What challenges with regards to work-life balance, pay, since being included? Mariana, you mentioned yourself as a woman of color. Just was interested to know what's like not always bragged about when it comes to aerospace.
So it's not going to be your Facebook, Salesforce. For me, the demographics of the people who are there are oftentimes just not exposed to the language and the culture and stuff that is very much more progressive. So obviously I have encountered all kinds of sexism, ageism, all of that kind of stuff. I will say though that in every place that I've been, there has been a really concerted effort by the leadership. I was in formal women in leadership and women in science engineering programs. I've had amazing male mentors and sponsors and bosses and everything. And I've also got my first VP position while I was extremely pregnant. I have a 9-day-old in the other room right now. So, I mean, it's changing, but I would say you would have to be patient with the culture. I'm not going to have a 6-month maternity leave like I would at probably some of those tech companies. But so I'm saying it's changing, but be realistic when you're going into it that it's not going to be exactly the same as probably your friends who are in tech or consulting, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mentioned like being a woman of color in the industry, but I've been very fortunate. I am very grateful, but I've been treated with great respect by everyone. My team, like until recently, it was 10 men and me. And I'm in Minnesota, and like I speak to like 60-year-old P5 design engineers, and when I say something is right, they agree with me if I'm right. So I think a lot of it is just making sure you're confident and make sure you do your work, and you can be well respected no matter what you look like. A lot of it for me, just internalizing it, or like making sure if it's internal or not. But for me, primarily it's gonna sound so silly, but I love my job. I wish I could work more, but I have a personal life too. So that work-life balance is super important, and creating those limitations, because if you're working like 60, 70, 80-hour weeks and you're producing great work, they're not going to expect that work to go down. That's going to be the new expectation. So trying to make sure you stay like healthy and are happy with your overall lifestyle is really important. So finding that balance and creating that reputation of like producing good work, but making sure you're not kind of going overboard. And just kind of making sure there's good communication with your supervisor when you do enter the industry. Just understand what the expectations are. But for me, like the work-life balance can be a little bit challenging, but I'm trying to just take it a day at a time.
So I've struggled to find a mentor in my field. I'm coming from academia. I've been in industry for a little over a year now. And I don't know of anyone who has a background in SAR that's in industry. The number of women that were in SAR in academia was at professor level was like 3 in the United States. And yeah, I haven't met any women in SAR in industry. So I would personally want a mentor. So I could learn how to navigate industry a bit better. Like I feel like there's just, a whole language that I need to be exposed to. When Alex mentioned space as a service, I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. How do I learn more of this? Yeah, so it comes down to, lack of representation, and also just, being at the forefront of this field. There's going to be less mentors, especially if you're a woman of color.
Thanks, Sophie, for sharing that. I wanted to ask about applying to these roles. From what do you know of hiring practices? And I don't know if this question is too specific, but when it comes to resumes, how much emphasis do your companies or industries put on things like GPA, previous internships, level of education, like how important is a graduate degree? Maybe if you could just share what you know.
I have a little bit of a controversial perspective on this. I didn't have the highest GPA coming out of Cal. Ended strong. Early years weren't the best, and it's almost never been brought up in my professional career at all. And I very, very rarely know like what my employees' GPAs were. It mostly comes up in conversation. The flip side of that, though, internships have made all the difference when people are able to tie stuff that they were learning in their internship and really can show an understanding of they know how to work in a company environment with a team and know what they're doing is contributing to the business side. That's invaluable. So personally, from my experience of myself being hired and when I'm hiring other people, I much more focus on the internship side of it.
Quickly, Alex, would you say that approach to GPA, is that for the defense contracting industry, is that fairly consistent?
It might be changing from, I'm a little bit older. So like from when I got in the door, I don't know that for sure. I can't speak intelligently to that one.
Magali, how about you for recruiting?
So I haven't been in that role quite yet. But from personal experience, it seems like if your GPA is low, you could definitely supplement that with research experience, with internships. But that being said, even if you have a high GPA, you should definitely be pursuing internships and research experiences.
And for graduate degrees in your industry and business?
Same.
Okay. How about you, Mariana?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think experiences have a lot of weight. So your internships, research, building teams, just everything you do outside of the classroom counts a lot. Obviously push for that the highest GPA you possibly can, but don't feel like you can't get into a good position if you have a lower GPA. Yeah, especially for industry. I think PhD programs can be challenging at times, but industry is more flexible.
So you're saying that it's not necessary to have a graduate level degree?
Oh, I meant like in terms of GPA, because I applied to grad school just to get a master's and I didn't get in because I didn't have, or who knows what the reason was. But through industry, I got all the opportunities I could have ever wanted, and though I didn't have the best GPA.
And Andrew, I saw you put a question in the chat kind of similar to this. I hope that answered it, but just let me know if you need more clarity there. So we're going to start to wrap up. I want to thank you all for taking the time. As a last question, as we're going, maybe if you feel comfortable, please share contact details in the chat for our students. If you want, you can do LinkedIn or you can do email. It's up to you. But again, don't feel pressured to do that. Just wanted to kind of ask like final thoughts, like last piece of advice that you can pass on. And again, to not just, the students will be watching this video, so they'll definitely hear it. So what advice would you have for students who are maybe kind of approaching graduation, or maybe you're just figuring out that they want to go into aerospace?
I can go first. Some just general advice is get educated on what all of the options are. Space News has a daily and weekly digest, and it could get you really familiar to what's happening within the industry, within technologies and startups and all of that stuff. You can sign up and they send you something right to your inbox every morning. And then Aviation Week does a really good job in terms of comprehensive stuff. So just getting educated to even figure out what piques your interest and like what things you might be interested in. And then I would second what Mariana said in terms of don't be afraid to cold call for mentorship. I think a lot of people, just the fact you're reaching out, and if you've done your homework and have specific questions for them, most people are going to be flattered and are going to want to help you, quite frankly.
I was able to get most of my experiences through just sending out an email. If a person that you contacted doesn't respond, email them again. What's the worst that can happen? The best thing that can happen is an amazing opportunity. So yeah, network, reach out, make opportunities for yourself, be proactive.
That's my mantra to students. I just, like you say, just reach out. What's the worst that can happen? They ignore you, but then again, it doesn't cost you anything. Thanks. All right, Mariana, last word.
Yeah, just echoing what they said already. Network, seek mentorship, don't be shy. Try to expand your experience as much as possible. If there's research opportunities, internships, just everything, and just explore the industry and kind of figure out what you're most excited about. That way, when you're interviewing, you can sound genuine and excited.
To all our panelists, thank you so much. Such great information. Like I said, we'll make this video available on our YouTube channel. We'll send it out to students. I will include the contact details as part of the video. I hope you're okay with that. If you change your mind for some reason and you prefer me to do LinkedIn, just let me know and I can switch it out. I know it's asking a lot of you to give up your time in the evening, in the middle of the week, but thank you so much. Really appreciate it. These success of these events really relies on alums like you giving back and lifting while you climb. So thank you so much for that. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and yeah, look forward to engaging with you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.